and we'll just sort of start, mate, and just see how it goes. Okay. Bethany, thanks so much for doing this interview for the Control-Alt-Delete course. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, your name, where you live, all those kind of fun facts.
Yeah, so I'm Bethany MacDonald and I currently live in Scotland, and I have a little boy. I'm married up here, and my husband is from Scotland, which is why we're up here, and I am doing 2 days a week for Naked Truth, doing various different things.
Why did you do that? Why did you reach out to Naked Truth in the first place?
Well, the first time we ever connected was years and years ago when I was looking for help myself with pornography addiction, and felt like there was nothing available. And so I sent a sly email saying, there's not enough for women here. And you emailed back and said, great, do you want to be involved? And I said, no, because I was not in that place. And I thought, there is no way I want to be involved in a porn charity. But then years down the line, was reminded of that conversation, had gone through recovery myself, and then thought, you know what, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help other people. I want people to know that they're not alone, that they're not the only person who struggles and battles with this. And so that was that.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a job. That was great.
So porn's been part of your life.
Yep.
I mean, maybe just kind of tell us how that began. At what point did you first kind of have porn in your life, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I was young at the age of 9, and that's, you know, a lot of people's stories that they had an accidental exposure to it just out of curiosity. Typed in masturbation into Ask Jeeves at that point, because somebody had said it in sex education and I didn't know what it was. And my family tried to really protect us. We had the computer in the public space in the living room, so I snuck down. And obviously what came up was not, a nice description of what that is, but lots of videos and just things that just shocked me. But at the same time, also intrigued me, because I thought, oh, wow, this is what human bodies look like. And so my little 9-year-old brain started to just take in and soak in these images. And really what happened then over the following decade and a little bit more was that I found that I couldn't stop looking at pornography. So it started out as intrigue and curiosity, wanting to educate myself. Then as a teenager, feeling like other people around me were having sex, and so I needed to know more. And so what started out as curiosity then actually just became this horrible cycle of feeling so ashamed of what I was looking at. But then it leading me right back into it, because I felt so unlovable and thought, I can't tell anybody this because I'll get rejected. I could never be in a relationship with anybody. And so all I have is me and pornography. And that was through up until the age of about 20.
Okay. How did it feel for you as a woman struggling with this? Did it feel different? Did it feel more difficult because you're a woman, do you think, to talk about it? Or
yeah, I think so. I think shame is usually the thing that keeps everybody within, keeping a secret. But as a woman especially, because if I ever turned for help, a lot of the things were for men and directed at men. And if anything was ever directed at women, it was towards maybe the wives of a male porn user. And so I genuinely, which now I look back on and I think, gosh, how could I ever think that? I genuinely thought that I was the only woman in the whole world who must struggle with this, because everything I read and saw seemed to be directed at men. And so that created a lot of insecurity. I'm thinking, starting to think, well, what's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with my sexuality? Why do I want to look at this stuff? And led to a lot of shame. And the reality is, it is mainly, pornography is, directed by men, created for men.
Yeah, and I guess both men and women might look at different types of porn, and obviously there's kind of different genres of porn and all that kind of thing. But I guess what would be in common with both men and women is potentially what porn does for people. And that's something I want us to kind of focus on in this module of the course and in our conversation. Now, that sounds like a little bit of a strange thing to say, even, what is porn doing for you? Because because you can reply and just go, well, isn't that obvious? And a little bit embarrassing to say out loud. But actually, we're kind of not talking about that kind of surface level, do you have an orgasm or not? But actually more the kind of emotional and psychological, I guess, kind of stuff that goes on there, that people turn to porn for all sorts of different reasons, actually. And it becomes something, maybe it starts to function maybe as a coping mechanism or a way of self-soothing, for example. And that's some of the stuff I'd love us to dig into just in this conversation now. I mean, in your experience as a former porn user, and particularly maybe as you became older, say in your older teens and 20s, I mean, did you find that porn was less about the sex side of things and it was something that was doing something else or something more?
Yeah, absolutely. And we find that as people do go through Click to Kick, they say exactly the same thing, that it maybe starts out as a physical release, you need something quick and that does the job. But then actually that's just quite a naive perspective, and probably the perspective that the porn industry want us to have. And people say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just a little bit of porn, who cares, if you can't have sex, it's fine, just do it. But actually it's the way that we are, our whole being, our emotions, that are all tied in with even with our physical body. And so we have connections to the people that we're seeing. So, for me, especially as I got to be a teenager, I felt very lonely. Lots of people were getting into relationships and I didn't want that. And so I turned to porn when I felt lonely, which now you look at it or in the light of day, you think, well, that's just silly because you're on your own with a laptop. But at the time you think, okay, well, I feel incredibly lonely. And so this is going to fill that void. It makes me feel wanted. It makes me feel loved. The reality obviously is, as soon as that's over, you close the laptop, you realize you're on your own in your bedroom, and the feeling increases. And that's the same for people. Maybe people turn to it because they feel angry or stressed out. They've had a really horrible argument with their partner or at work. And so they just need a kind of physical adrenaline rush. And so they turn to it, have this release, and then it's over. And then what? You still have the angry and the stressed out feelings because it hasn't really dealt with it. And so it can make us feel empowered when we feel weak or undermined. And obviously the reality is it doesn't actually provide what we need for those emotions.
So, I mean, you've talked about a few things there, loneliness, anger,
stress,
desire to be empowerment, stress. I mean, do you find that these are common things then? As you've done Click to Kick and led Click to Kick groups, do you think these are common themes?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the exercises that we do in Click to Kick is thinking about the positives of acting out. So what is it that we turn to porn for? Why are we going there? And there's just a big list, and you can tick the things, and most people tick all of them and say, yeah, I've used it for when I'm upset, stressed, angry, worried, afraid. Even to turn to it, like I said, to feel strong and empowered. So when we feel weak or if we feel embarrassed, or it gives us that feeling of being powerful as well. It can be a comforter. It can be lots of.
Why do people keep turning to stuff, do you think, that they've already decided in their head is not a healthy way to cope with stuff, but it's still there in their life?
It's very easy to get frustrated and ask the question, why do I keep turning to it if I know it's bad or if I know it's unhealthy and unhelpful? But I think there's just something inherently within us that we want a quick fix. And so, when we feel, for example, let's say you've had an argument with somebody at work, well, looking at porn feels a lot quicker and easier than having to go and write an email, go for a meeting, try and resolve that. And I think it's trying to take a step back and in that moment saying, okay, what is actually long-term going to be healthy for me? Because it doesn't deal with those emotions. And actually we need to try and deal with the root of the discomfort.
So you think... Yeah, so you, in a way, you're kind of saying it's both the long-term comfort that something's been in your life, plus the quick fix nature of the fact that, it works now, even if it's long-term not what I want.
Yeah. And the irony is that it actually makes all of those things worse. We think it's providing something, but actually it increases stress, it increases loneliness, it increases those feelings, it breaks down relationships, our brain becomes even more addicted to it. And so we keep going back to it, even though in the temporary, it might provide a very 2 to 5, 10-minute release, then that's it.
In your own experience, how did you see a shift? And I guess at some point you had to do what you've described. You had to take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, this feels like it's working and it's a comfort to me, but long term I can see it's not working. But how did you make that shift from, I know this isn't great, but I'm still turning to it, to actually finding a way and a pathway out of using porn as a way to self-soothe or to cope?
Yeah, I think as you said, having the realization about what you're turning to porn to, it's actually potentially even more than half the battle, because it can feel like, in the moment, for me, it felt like a huge mess in my mind. I didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. I didn't even like it at times, and it was just a very big, confusing mess. So I didn't even want to think about it or deal with it. And so actually answering the question and coming up with 5 to 10, whatever it is, things that you're turning to porn, it just brought clarity for me, because I thought, oh, that's why. And there are things I can do about the fact that I feel lonely. I can go and find community. I can go and spend time with my family. I can make a phone call every evening. And these aren't necessarily porn related conversations. It was just to try and actually, if I'm feeling stressed out, then going to the gym or going for a walk or talking to somebody about it, or prayer and reflection and meditation, all of these things. When we actually then see, oh, there are other ways that I already deal with those emotions, just helps. And being able to have the awareness in that moment when you feel incredibly tempted. I remember feeling crippled, not fearing moving, because I thought if I move, I'm going to look at porn. Being able to say to myself, okay, well, why? Stop. Why? What is it that you want from it right now? Okay, it's because you feel afraid, or it's because you feel trapped. So what's another option here? I'm going to speak to a friend. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to have a cold shower. I'm going to, whatever it is. And so there are coping mechanisms that people can use, short term and long term, to overcome the initial temptation. But then there are also things that are, I guess, just good habits to have in our life, just generally. And so whether that's going to the gym every day, eating healthily, doing these things that make us feel empowered, daily reflection and prayer, things that make us feel good, not just always trying to avoid the bad stuff, but what things do you enjoy doing? What makes you feel, what makes you come to life? What makes you, and making sure that we're filling our lives with all of that stuff, as well as trying to avoid the negative.
Yeah, and we'll be digging a little bit deeper into some of those things in other modules. How do you pursue some of those things? And I think what's fair to say, and maybe what people are thinking at the moment, is when you are feeling really weak and low, and that you've kind of lost a lot of battles, the idea of having the energy and strength to start going to the gym a bit more or eating healthier just feels way beyond you, because it's kind of like, it's hard enough even imagining what it would be like to stop, let alone start something. But I think it's important that people hear that, incrementally, even as we talked about before in this course, even just kind of like the little decisions you make, you're not going to become the super version of yourself straight away. But even just the little decisions you make must start to have a long-term impact. That's why recovery matters. That's why completing this course is really important, that you see it through. That's why joining Click to Kick group is going to be really helpful for people, because it does cause us to kind of open our eyes a little bit and review ourselves and be honest with ourselves. And actually, that's kind of what we need to do.